Okay, please stand everyone for the prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So good afternoon, class. So how are you feeling today? Okay, that's great. So before we start, let me check your attendance first. Is anyone's absent today? Okay, very good. Seems like you are interested for today's topic. So, who can recall what was our last topic? Yes? Okay, it's all about learners with difficulty hearing. So before we formally start, I have a classroom rules. So first, if the discussion is started, no one is allowed to talk unless your name is called. Second, listen attentively. And most importantly, respect each other. Am I clear? Okay, very good. And now, I have here a quote. So, the quote here is, not being able to speak is not the same as having nothing to say, by Rosemary Crowley. So, in your own words, what this quote means to you? Yes? Okay, very good. So, this quote means that just because a person don't speak, it doesn't mean they are lack of thoughts, feelings, and ideas to share. Even without speech, they still have something valuable to say. And it's up to us to find ways to listen to them and to understand them. So, my questions is, how would you feel if others didn't understand you when you were trying to communicate? Yes, very good. So, it can be feel frustrated, lonely, and it might be anxious. So, without being understood, it's like your voice doesn't matter, or you feel as we are not connected to those around us, as if there's a wall between our thoughts and how people understand us. So this can be frustrating, and it can lead us to have a self-doubt or reluctance that to communicating again. Another question. Another question. In what ways do you think that communication difficulties might impact on someone's everyday lives rather? Yes. So communication difficulties might impact on a person's daily lives in socializing. So it's hard for the child to participate a group discussion. So it's hard for the child to make friends. So it's hard for them to connect with others. So another is in school. So it's hard also for the child to participate on the class discussion. So this can affect them. This can affect on their self-confidence. Another thing is in their daily activities. So it might be a hard task for them to finish that kind of task. So another question is, why is it important to learn communication challenges even if we don't face ourselves? Yes, understanding communication challenges is valuable because it can help us to be more compassionate and adaptable. It can create a welcoming environment for those individuals who communicate differently and respond to them with patience and kindness. So in learning these challenges, we can avoid misunderstanding and reduce the stereotypes that people with speech or language disabilities often face. So this awareness also enhances our interaction, and it makes us good listener and a thoughtful communicator. So now our topic for today is talks about learners with difficulty in communicating. So some of the students have struggled with communication, either in expressing themselves or their feelings and or their thoughts, or in comprehending what others say. So some of this might be diagnosed disability or might be having a developmental delays that affecting their speech and language skills. So we will discuss it later. So now let's define first what is communication. So communication, it is the interactive exchange of information, ideas, feelings, needs, and desires between they and among people. So in other words, communication, it is a two-way process where people shares information or express ideas. It's used for many purposes like telling stories, giving explanation, asking for things or asking helps, or sharing about facts, and so on. So am I understood? Okay, very good. So now let's proceed to the speech. So speech is the expression of language with sounds or oral production. So when we say speech, class, it is about how we produce sounds and words to communicate. So it involves the coordination of the muscles in the mouth, throat, and vocal cords to create a spoken words. So speech aspects includes articulation rather, voice and fluency. So am I clear? Okay, very good. So now let's move on to the language. So what is the difference between speech and language? Okay, when we say language, it is a formalized code used by a group of people to communicate with one another. So, in other words, class, language, it is a system of words or a symbol and rules that allows us to communicate meaning and express ideas. So, am I clear? Okay, very good. So, let's proceed to the next topic, which is the components of language. There are 5 components of language. So, components of language, let us first tackle phonology. So, when we say phonology, class, it refers to the sound system of a language. So, phonology, class, it refers to the sound system of a language. So, in other words, class, phonology, it is how sounds works in a language. So, for example, in the words helps and bees. So, in the words helps, the letter S at the end, it's the same sound as letter S. While the words bees, so the sounds of the letter S sounds like letter Z. So, what is the difference between phonology and phonetics, class? So, when we say phonology, class, it is a combination of sounds. So, it is the study of speech sounds and how it changes depending on a specific context. So, when we say phonetics, class, it is only concerned on the speech sounds, or it is the study of individual speech sounds like A, unsay tingog sa A, like B or C. Nga na. So, am I clear? Okay, very good. So now let's go on to the morphology. So when we say morphology, class, it refers to the smallest unit of a language that has meaning and which are used to combine words. So when we say morphology, class, it is the study of word formation of structures of words, or it is the study of how words are built from a smaller parts which call morpheme. So when we say morpheme, class, it is the smallest unit of a meaning. So now, words are made up of morphemes. So it's either a prefix, a root word or basis, or suffix. So for example, from the word category. So how many morphemes are there? Yes, it has only one morphemes. It's because the word category, it cannot be break down into a smaller unit of meaning. Kay ang cutting a word or goring a word, nada na siya meaning sa English dictionary. Di ba? Wa. So maunang one morphemes na siya. So another example is the word categorize. So how many morphemes are there? Yes. So it has two morphemes. It's because of the root word category and the suffix word ize. So, am I understood? Okay, here's the tip. So, try to forget about how words is spelled. Instead, determine on the words that carries meaning. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So now let's proceed to the words syntax. So syntax, class, is the system of rules governing the meaningful arrangement of words which also include grammar rules. So in other words, class, syntax, it is about how words put together to make a sentence. It has a set of rules that telling us the right order of a word so that it makes sense when we speak or write. So, for example, in a sentence structure, subject, verb, object, agreement. So the sentence, the cat sat on the mat. So where is the object there? Yes, of course, the cat. How about the verb? Yes, the words sat. And the object is on the mat. So if the sentence are arranged into different order, there's no longer make sense because it doesn't follow the proper syntax. So proper syntax, class, it helps to ensure that sentence are clear and meaningful. So am I understood? Okay, very good. So now let's proceed to the words semantics. Okay. Semantics refers to the meanings associated with words and combination of words in a language. So when we say semantic, class, it is the study of meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. So it is the study of how words convey information and that information is interpreted. So for example, the word run. So the word run has a different meaning depending on the context. It can be either a person is running or a refrigerator running. So ang ref is nigana pa, nga na. So another example is the word bat. So it has different meaning. It can be bat, an animal, animal mammal. And another meaning is it is a sports equipment. Kanang bitaw gamiton nga inigsaw sa bola or sa baseball. Nga na. So, I understood. Okay, very good. So now, let's proceed to pragmatics. So, pragmatic class, it revolves around the social use of language, knowing what, when, and how to communicate and use language in a specific content. So when we say pragmatic class, it is a understanding and using of language in a way that fits on the social context. So there are three kinds of pragmatic class. First, using language for different purposes. So example ani class is narrating. So a student tells a story about their weekend vacations, or requesting, or a student requests in an extension for their homework project. Yan. So second is changing language according to the context. So example ani class is kintay. So makikistorya kas imong friend. So imong kuan jud, imong gamiton nga language is casual language. For example, hey, what's up bro? Nga na. So makatubang kag instructor or maestra nimo, so syempre formal language imong gamiton. Like maingon ka, good morning sir or ma'am, can I disturb you for a while because I have something to discuss with you. So I understood. Last thing is following rules of conversation and storytelling. So example ani class is taking turns. So naay duha ka tao nga nagistorya. So parehas sila nga maghuwat before sila mo response. Di kay mapagay siya na humag istorya mo response sa dayon. Nga na. So another thing is rephrasing when unclear. So if a person doesn't understand on your point, rephrasing it or explain it in another way para makasabot ang imong kaistorya. So, I understood? Okay, very good. And now, let's proceed to another topic, which is speech impairments. So, speech impairments class are communication disorders such as stuttering, impaired articulation, a language or voice impairment. So when we say speech impairment class, it is a condition that makes it hard for a person to speak clearly or fluently. It can affect how the sounds are made, how the smooth speech is, or the quality of the person's voice. So this can affect, it's difficult for others to understand them. So now, there are different types of speech impairment. So, first, it is what we call articulation disorder. So, articulation disorder, a child is unable to produce a given sound physically. So, when we say articulation disorder class, it is when someone has a trouble in pronouncing certain words correctly. So, there are 4 types of errors in articulation. So, first is substitution. So, when we say substitution class, is i-replace niya ang uban nga words. For example, or letters. For example, the word cat. So, ang letter C, rather, pulihan niya letter T. So, mahimo na siyang tat. So, kasabot? Okay. So, second is, it is what we call omission. So, when we say omission, class, is kuhaon niya ang lisod i-pronounce. So, for example, the birds are flying. Instead of flying, nahimo na siyang flying. So, sabtan? Okay. And third is, it is what we call distortion. So when we say distortion, class, di niya kuhaon, di niya pulihan, pero sayo pagka-pronounce. So for example, the words tell me. So ini-pronounce niya, mahimo na tell me. Another thing is the words correct. So ini-pronounce niya, mahimong correct. So am I understood? Okay, and the last thing is, it is what we call addition from the words add. So, sumpayan. Ada niya ang usa ka words. So, for example, the word dog. So, ini-pronounce sa bata, mahima siyang dog. Dog. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So, now let's proceed to the second types of speech impairments. It is what we call phonological disorder. So phonological disorder a child produces multiple patterns of sounds errors with obvious impairment of intelligibility. So when we say phonological disorder, class, it is refers to the difficulties in understanding sound system and speech rule. So children can be pronounced some words, but di siya makapronounce sa uban. So sabot. So for example, that pie is good. So, nag-pronounce sa bata, cat pie is good. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So, and the third, it is what we call fluency disorder. So, fluency disorder, it is refers to the difficulties with the rhythm and timing of speech. So when we say fluency disorder, class, it is when someone has a trouble in speaking smoothly. So this means, they usually means by the stretch sounds or repeated sounds. So ang best example ani class, it is what we call stuttering. So when we say stuttering, it is the repetition of the sounds like Ngana. So in our term, class, it is what we call nga nagkanga-kanga. So am I understood? Okay, very good. So now let's proceed to the last types of speech impairments, which is what we call voice disorder. So voice disorder, it is a problem with the quality or use of one's voice resulting from disorder of the larynx. So when you say voice disorder, class, is when there's a problem with the sounds of the person's voice. So this can be sounds hoarse. So it's not hoarse kabayo kasa, it is hoarse. It can be the changes of the pitch or the rhythm of the person's voice. So it can be too low, too high, or too quiet, or it cannot be breakdown sometimes, or magsakit po lang tutunlan kadugay nilang istorya. So ang example ani class, it is what we call hypernasality o hyponasality. So hyponasality, class, kana bitawng way hangin mo gawas sa ilang ilong. Sa example ani, nga na. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So now, let's proceed to the language disorder. So, language disorder, class, are characterized by persistent difficulties in acquiring use of language. So when we say language disorder class, it is when someone has a trouble in using or understanding words and sentences. So there are different types of language disorder class. So first language disorder, it is what we call expressive language disorder. So expressive language disorder, it interferes with the production of language. So when we say expressive language disorder class, it is when the child has a trouble in speaking or talking, or kinabitaw ang sa kabata maglisod siya istorya, maglisod siya express sayang feelings or thoughts and ideas. So maglisod mo siya sabot. I know it's a sabot. So makasabot siya pero maglisod siya istorya ba, maglisod siya express. Maglisod mo siya answer sa mga pangutana. Pero makasabot siya sa iyang mga nadunggan o iyang mga nabasa or nakit-an niya sa mga palibot. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So now let's proceed to the receptive language disorder. So, receptive language disorder class, it interferes with the understanding of language. So, when we say receptive language disorder class, it is the combination of expressive language disorder and the receptive. So, nganhi ang bata is di siya makabasa sa iyang mga nakita or di siya kasabot sa iyang mga nadunggan nga na or nakapalibot. So maglisod po siya follow sa mga instruction. Maglisod po siya answer sa mga pangutana. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So, always remember that receptive, it is the combination of expressive and receptive. So, di jud maglisod jud ang bata ni sabot or istorya. So, okay. So, here are the characteristics of the language disorder. So, receptive or expressive. So, mao ni siya yang mga differences. So, expressive language disorder class. So, a child with a trouble has a only limited vocabulary, incorrect grammar or syntax, expressive repetition of information, and difficulty in formulating questions. So, maglisod siya pangutana po. Difficulty in constructing sentences as well. So, while receptive language disorder class is maglisod siya follow oral direction. So, maglisod siya sunod sa mga instruction. Nga na. Understanding humor or figurative language. Comprehending compound and complex sentences. And also, responding to question appropriately. Okay. Children class with a communication difficulties may experience also a behavioral difficulties because maglisod sila express sa ilang ideas or ilang magibang bati ba nga na. So according sa Gardner's theory, ang mga bata kuno is has a different abilities. It can be in musical, bodily kinesthetic, or in spatial. So it can be the children good in painting or in dancing nga na ang according to the Gardner's theory. So now why it happens man? So nganong na may mga bata nga has a difficulties in communicating. So there are various reason or causes. First is developmental factors or genetic factors. So kanang kuan ba murag ilang namana or na-inherit nila gikan sa ilang pamilya. Maong dugay maka istorya ang bata or maka catch up og mga bag-ong words or language, especially og di sila ma-expose ngadto sa ubang tao nga na. So another thing is, it is what we call neurological conditions. So neurological condition class kanang na brain injury, na brain tumor, nga na autism, nga na. So another thing is environmental factors, kanang kuan or sociological or psychological factors like cause of stress, traumas, or anxieties. So another thing is kanang na mga aphasia ang bata or birth defects like na Down syndrome or na cerebral palsy. Pregnancy problem in pregnancy like kanang mga premature nga bata, kanang wa pa ganis na saktos buwan nigawas na sila nga na. So another thing is their hearing loss. So mao sa day rason nganong maglisod ang bata og kuan communicate or ipagsabot. Okay? So now, makuan ba? Nabay treatment ang mga bata nga na? Yes, of course, na treatment. So magkuha sila og this is what we call SLP. So speech language pathologist, mag-specialista na ba sa communication difficulties. How do specialists determine speech and language problem? Saan ko nila pagkaibaw nga nung naikuan communication difficulties. So first, case history or physical examination. So when we say case history, more bitag i-background check nilang bata sa ilang especially na ilang mental records or achievement test scores sa eskwelahan. Nga na. So when we say physical examination, i-check po nila ang oral peripheral mechanism. Includes na mouth, teeth, lips, o tongue. Another thing, it is hearing also. I-check po nila ang pandung sa bata if basin maunay nakapikto sa ilang speech production. So another thing is articulation. Kanang pag-pronounce sa bata or nga na pagbasa niya sa usa ka words. So another thing is phonological awareness and processes. So phonological awareness is i-test po nila ang bata if kamao ba mabasa or if the child know how to identify words, sounds, or identify the individual sounds in a word, or to breaking down the words into its individual sounds. So when we say overall language development and vocabulary, so they used a formal test to measure the child's uses of language or understanding the language. Kanang mogamit ba sila og mga basic vocabulary like color, shapes, or mga simple action like anang nikaon or matog. So another thing is assessment of language function. So when we say assessment of language function, so i-evaluate po nila if how the child uses words or language to communicate. Another thing, it is what we call assessment of language function. So the specialist will evaluate on how the child uses language to communicate their needs, their ideas, or thoughts in a specific context. Last thing is language sample and observation in natural setting. So dere i-check pod sa mga specialista ang murag giunsa nila paggamit ang language ngadto sa pakighalubilo nila sa ubang tao nga na include na nila ang include na diri ang parents interaction or caregivers or to their peers. So am I understood? So nganong gibuhat man ni sa mga specialist. So in observing nga naman gibuhat man is mga specialista nga process. It's because observing a child has a communication difficulties is very important because it helps to the specialist to understand the specific needs of that child and also to identify the possible causes that affecting their speech production or their ability to communicate. So observation also allows to the professional to see which skills like vocabulary, pronunciations that need an additional support. So am I understood? Okay, very good. So now let's go on to the general educational characteristic. See, it is what we call universal design for learning. So when we say universal design for learning, it is an educational framework that aims to meet the diverse needs of all the learners. So it by providing a multiple means of engagement activities like hands-on activities, group activities, or individual project. And also presentation. So include na dili, it's either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And last thing is expression. Example ani, it can be drawing or painting. So universal design for learning, it is a learning environment where all the students, regardless to their abilities, they can access the curriculum and to achieve success. So I'm understood. Okay, so now let's proceed to the practical tips for a classroom. So first, it allows the child to sit near the teacher and the blackboard away from auditory and visual distractions such as the window and the door. So, ang imong mga estudyante, so ipaduol jud nimo di kay ipaduol sa mga bitana kay more bitog ma-distract sila at nala maminas gawas or sitanaw sa gawas. So second is get the child's attention before giving directions. So understandable naman siya, more bitog kuha ni mo attention sa bata before ka maghatag og direction para maminaw ang bata. So third, use pictures, charts, and other visual aids when explaining content to supplement auditory information. So magamit ka og mga visual aids or mga charts or pictures para maengganyo ang bata nga maminaw nimo. Ikaapat, speak slowly and clearly without exaggerating speech. So syempre, hinahinayan pud nimo imong tingog para di po mahadlok ang bata or makuratan or para maminaw po nimo ang bata. Next is simplify direction into short steps. So maghatag og direction, minog bua more bitaw specific pa para makasabot ang bata. So next, provide a written copy of direction for a task so the child can refer back to it on his or her own pace. So mag-provide ka kuan or batag isuwat nimo imong mga direction. Yan na. So next, use gestures to clarify information. So magamit ka hand gestures like parehanga na nga ana para ma-clarify or masabtan jud sa bata. So next, use peer-mediated instruction so that peers without difficulties can serve as a language. So more bitaw iuban or interact ang sa bata ngadto sa kanang bata nga makamao may istorya para murtag maka-learn pud ang usa ka bata. So next, provide extra time to prepare for oral language activities. So, kuan bitaw, magtagani mog time ang mga bata para maka-prepare sa ilang kaugalingon para makatubag, di sila murag ma-pressure nga na or ma-stress. So next, model correct language forms and use appropriate wait times to give the child time to think. So, like what I said, tagani mog time ang bata para makahuna-huna or maka-prepare sa ilang istorya nga na or more bitaw i-express. So last is explicitly teach vocabulary that is needed in the learning context to promote better comprehension. So kuan more bitaw siya kuan mag-provide or magtulo kag mga kuan vocabulary, mga basic vocabulary sa kuan para kanang magamit sa ilang daily activities nga na. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. Those tips and techniques that teachers can use to provide the students with communication difficulties the support they need in order to be successful. So, am I understood? Okay, very good. So now, let's go on to our activity. So we have an activity, a group activities. So you're going to do is to create a scenario that portraying the learners with communication disabilities and use some strategies on how to assist them. So, am I clear? So we have a criteria. The content is 20 points or 20%. So the teamwork 15 points and engagement 15 points. Total of 50 points. So let's do it.
Ano ka tao sa... Ay, hirap ka.
Mukhang gabi. Semantics.
Nagkatawa na mo kasi imuhang object. Cat is the object.
Semantic perceptive. Okay, very good. So you have a nice performance. So thank you so much for your cooperation, guys. So now let's proceed to our assessment. Okay, so please read the instructions. Identify the correct term or concept based on the description provided. Write your answer in a 1/4 sheet of paper. So, okay, are you done? Okay, let's now check your paper. So please read everyone. Number 1. It refers to the meanings associated with words and combination of words in a language. So what's the answer, class? Yes, it is semantics. So who is correct? Okay, very good. So, number 2, a person has a trouble in understanding a language. So, what's the answer, class? Yes, it's receptive language disorder. So, he's correct. Okay, very good. So, number 3, it is a formalized code used by a group of people to communicate with one another. So, what's the answer? Yes, it is language. So, number 4, it is the system of rules governing the meaningful arrangement of words which include grammar rules. So, what's the answer, class? Yes, it is syntax. So, who got the correct answer? Okay, very good. And the last is, it is a conditions that impact the voice quality, pitch, volume, or flexibility, making communication difficult and affecting one's quality of life. So is the answer. So what's the answer rather? Yes, it is a voice disorder. So who got the correct answer? Okay, very good. So who got perfect? Okay, very good. So for your assignment class, study for the next topic. So as simple as that. For your concluding activity, I want one representative to answer my question. So the question is, what is the difference between speech impairments and language disorder? Okay? Yes, very good. So, speech impairment class, it is a condition that makes it hard for a person to speak correctly or fluently. So, while language disorder class, it is someone has a trouble in using or understanding words and sentences. So I hope you learned something for today's topic class, and that's for today, and see you on next meeting. So goodbye class.